Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie, and in today's video we are back in the Outback Track, our Australian mini zoo, and we're going to be building for the smallest bird in the game, and that is of course the ever adorable little penguin. When I first started building this habitat, I knew straight away that I wanted it to be an aviary style habitat. Now don't get me wrong, I am fully aware that these little adorable penguins cannot fly. We're not trying to keep them in, but instead we're trying to keep other birds out. At various penguin habitats that I've seen throughout my life, there has been the slight issue of birds like herons and other fish feeding birds coming in and trying to take advantage of feeding time of the penguins and stealing the fish for themselves. So we're going to make sure that this habitat is entirely covered with netting, making sure that any fish feeding birds can't swoop in to try and take the food themselves. To build this netting, I start out by using a nice Australian pole to supply a support structure for the whole thing. Then we're going to start to utilise some of the new Oceania building pieces, and we're going to use some of the netting. This is by far my favourite version of the netting we have in game. We have various meshes and things, but I really like this new netting that we've got from the Oceania pack, so I'm very happy to have it in game. And I'm also going to be using some of the European window shutter hinges that come from the European pack, and we're going to use those as kind of anchor points, which is going to kind of just show what is holding the netting onto the main poles. Once I'm happy with how the single portion of the netting is looking, all I need to do is duplicate it and kind of throw it against the other side of the habitat, rotating it so that they kind of match, join them together with a pole, and then fill that gap that's at the roof of this habitat with more mesh or netting pieces. This will give me the framework that I can then select all of the building pieces we've got here to copy and paste along the whole length of this habitat, giving us a lovely aviary style netting around this habitat. With all of the netting in place, it was time to start digging out the deep sea swimming area, the area that is going to be viewable with some underwater viewing. So I'm just going to use the terrain stamp tool to get a decent depth here, and then I can kind of get a bit more creative with the sculpting of it afterwards, but for now I just want to know where this underwater viewing gallery is going to be. And to check that this area will sufficiently hold a good body of water, we're going to throw in a glass barrier across where we want the viewing gallery to be, and then fill it with water just to see how it's going to hold. Now, if you've been a viewer of this channel for any period of time, you may know that I am not the most elaborate of builders when it comes to human-based building. When it comes to the habitats, sure, I love making sure that it looks luscious and vibrant and wonderful for our animals, but for the guests I'm never the best at keeping them in mind. So for this build, I'm pushing the boat out, and I'm really trying to push myself and challenge myself with this build, make sure it looks like a really well-rounded building. But to figure it out to begin with, I'm just going to use some very basic wall pieces to kind of figure out our footprint for this building, understand what shape it's going to be taking up and how much area it's going to cover. Next, it was time to install all of our pathing that would be under the flooring we're going to put in this building, and let me tell you right now, it's one of the most frustrating experiences I've ever had in this game, and I did consider seeing how far my PlayStation would fly, but in the end I did get to a place that I was happy with, and we had a functional path that would work under the flooring we're going to add to this building. The flooring pieces for this structure were the same as all of the pieces that I'm using in this particular house, and those are from the Oceania pack. I really like these interwoven wooden kind of slats. I think they look really nice and they lend themselves to this beachy vibe that we're going for. Now, something that I did run into when placing this on the ground is that the ground isn't actually level, and unfortunately the flooring clips through the ground near the doorways. At least I thought it was unfortunate to begin with. I really didn't like how it looked. However, once I started to play about with it and stuff, I got it to look a little bit smoother, and it just appeared as if though sand had come through the doorway and onto the floor of this hut, which would happen because there were slopes either side of this. People would be cooking kicking the sand into this house as they come down the path. So I decided to keep it like that and just make it look a little prettier. To add a edge to the pathing that leads up to this building, I use these really cool volcanic rock pieces that come from the Oceania pack. I really like how they look. They look very rustic and just kind of edgy, which is really cool. And it looks nice and strong, so it's going to be able to hold back the earth that is kind of breaching either side of these pathways. We don't want the walls crumbling down or anything and crushing our guests as they enter this building, so we need to have some kind of support structure. As for the decorating of this building, my main two things I'm going to be using are these lovely painted logs from the Oceania pack, and one of my new favourite pieces, the rope coils. I use so many of these things just to add some interest to the wood, to wrap it round all the different beams and posts that you've got on this building, and suddenly it brings it to life. I must have used like maybe 30 pieces of rope on this building, just around random bits of wood, around the door frames and the support structures at the corners of the building and whatnot. I just went crazy with it and it was great fun. As for the roof, we're going to be using the nice new straw pieces from the Oceania pack, and we're just going to create a very basic roof. One of the great things about this new roof set is that they're not on the grid, meaning that you can change the angle and adjust the pitch yourself. Now for the gables, we're going to leave them nice and open, and we're going to use more wooden pieces to create a support structure, and of course we're going to cover those in ropes. And to fill the gaps, we are going to use some netting. Because we are going for this whole beachy vibe, almost as if though this is a fishing village at this portion of the zoo, we're going to have various shapes of nets hanging from the ceiling to make this feel kind of like a fishing hut. I also decided to use these really cool wooden panels, I guess you can call them, on the outside of the building, just to add a few kind of points of interest on the walls, because at the moment they're quite bland, but we don't want to be putting loads of stuff on the walls, so instead this is just going to help to break it up and add a little bit more texture to it and whatnot, and just make it seem like an actual building. Next up, it was time to start going absolutely crazy with various props from the Oceania pack. I love the new surfboards and oars, they just add a lot of character to places. All of the tiki stuff is amazing as well, and a huge special shout out for some custom education boards that are on the console workshop at the moment, created by the wonderful Veil, I believe that is their username. These little signs are beautiful and I'm so happy they exist. I'm going to be using them in some more of the habitats going forwards. They're just adding a lot of personality to our builds. On the other side of those black blocky walls we created earlier, I'm going to create a bit of a flower bed. So in order to fill the gap, we're going to use some mulch pieces, just because there is a huge gap and it's a really good way of disguising it. So I'm going to pop those there for now and I'll come back and plant those up later. So far, the only viewing gallery for this habitat is an underwater one, so I'm going to create a little window in amongst the mesh and stuff, using some of the building pieces we have already been using for our existing structure, and we're just going to use the exact same design as well. We're going to use these wooden logs and surround it with rope, and then it's a matter of adjusting the mesh and the netting just to fit and make sure it looks okay, because sometimes they don't line up exactly and we just need to make sure that it's okay from a distance. Next, we're going to finally move on to the inside of the habitat and we're going to start creating a habitat house. And to do that, we're going to use various faux rock pieces to create a kind of cave system at the back. From our viewer's perspective, it is going to look like a bunch of rocks and a cave. And then if you go behind the scenes, it's a nice open concrete area for our staff to be able to get a closer look at our penguins and enter the habitat to feed them and stuff, and maybe store some things back there as well. You know, your standard kind of habitat house. And we don't have to have it matching the Oceania theme we've got going on here. Instead, we're going to match it with the main theme of the zoo, which is the Australian building pieces, using those types of wooden pieces and stuff, just to tie it into the staff-centric points of the zoo that we've built so far. Decorating the inside of the habitat house is fairly simple. All we need to do is add a couple of the shelves that we built back in Primate Isles and then just load them up with stuff. And because of the conservation pack we got recently, we have loads of cool boxes and stuff that we can cover these shelves with and just make it seem like an actual living space that our zookeepers are constantly visiting in order to maintain the habitat. We're also going to make sure that we have a tap and a hose pipe near the wall, because obviously this is a water-based habitat and those kind of things are going to be very useful. Next up, it's time to start adding all of our enrichment items for our animals, making sure that we've got a quite equal dispersal of these items. So we've got food and toy enrichment everywhere to encourage our animals to move about the habitat and really make the most of what we've built for them. It was at this stage in the build that I decided to kind of change the swimming area a little bit, change up the shape so that we could have a waterfall at the rear of this habitat. This is just going to add a lot more life to the habitat and make it seem a lot more interesting and dynamic. And we're going to surround this pre-made waterfall with other rocks and such to make it look a little bit more natural. And with that, all that's really left for this habitat is to add all of our foliage, plant life, and the best bit of the entire build is of course this stage. So I'm going to pop it in time lapse for you so that you guys can really enjoy, just sit back and relax. But it's worth bearing in mind that during this time I also did work on the outside of the habitat, kind of where the path of the main zoo reaches this beachy area, and really dressed that up as well. But I didn't record that. I just wanted to spend a bit of time by myself making sure that I made the rest of the zoo look really pretty. So you will see how that looks in the end cinematics, and I hope you enjoy them because I'm really quite fond with how this beachy area is looking, and look forward to building for our next animal, which you might see a preview of if you're paying attention in the cinematics. So thank you so much for having watched this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and most importantly, share this video. That is the thing that helps the channel the most. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.
it's over.